And welcome back to this exciting COVID reboot series brought to you by the Cape Town Fashion Council. I'm your host for this season or for the series, Colin Donsko. Now, the Cape Town Fashion Council continues to pioneer and transform the growth, the development, and transition of South Africa's fashion economy. Over the next few weeks, you can expect some exciting initiatives and projects brought to you by the Fashion Council as we assist the industry to migrate and transition into the next season of the evolution of the country's growth. Now, in this exciting webinar or series, the Fashion Council is engaging leading voices in the industry to help us navigate and move forward. Now, today we're very excited to present Simon Deiner, a director at the Group of Creatives and SA Menswear Week. Simon, good afternoon and welcome.
Hey, Colin. Good to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Simon. On the series, we asked the very important question: what will the future, or what will the fashion industry of the future look like? And today, we're unpacking or dissecting the future of fashion shows. We know that you are a key player, one of the key players in the industry, and so again, we're very fortunate to have you on the show, Simon.
Thank you.
Now, Simon, firstly, everybody's talking about the new norm, yet there is no set norm, only an opportunity for us to adjust and then recreate the industry. Firstly, talk about where we are today as a fashion industry.
I think in terms of our segment of the fashion industry, it's quite interesting. There's been a explosion of fashion weeks over the past decade and surrounding fashion platforms. Some add value, some don't. There's been a hangover from this showing. There's been the onset of fashion fatigue. So, for us, for the past 3 years, we've been trying to ask the question, what can be done differently? And we've really started looking beyond the fashion week and what affects and drives a fashion week and a fashion show and why designers would do it, why media follow it, why people attend it. We're quite lucky. We've got some really big global partners in our business. And kind of as we've been in these markets, we've looked at what they're doing and taken the best of it and tried to bring it home. And globally, where does Africa sit? Because we pride ourselves on being African. So where's the industry at the moment right now? The new norm is this where we are? I think it's a transitional phase. It's forced us to come up with innovative solutions like we're doing right now. But also it's not going to last forever. Already, if you look at it, nightclubs even reopened in China, perhaps prematurely, but the world gets over things and it continues. It's I think, rebooted a lot of the way we approach stuff. And I think the future, we've still got to look at where it's going. But ultimately, I think what we really need to do is just stand back for the time being, seeing fashion weeks serve a specific purpose. The bloggers are jumping up and down, screaming the death of Fashion Week. I hate to break it to them. It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
They'll run out of content as well. So good luck there. But there's a transitional phase. So, we're looking at what we can do during this phase. And I know we'll touch on that a little bit later, and I'll bring it up. But then post the transitional phase, how do we integrate what we've learned to be better? Because ultimately, if we're not improving for the designers, for the followers of fashion, ultimately for the consumers, we're not doing anything
absolutely
that adds value in the long run.
That adds value. You mentioned transition. I want to zoom in on that quickly. You're known to be one of the most sought after creators when it comes to fashion shows, both locally and internationally. But what is this next step, or what will the next step for designers and producers be as part of this transition? What are the next steps?
If I split it up, we've always said in our business that creativity is not enough. There's 100 fashion show producers. There's probably 1,000, 2,000 companies around the world that do it, and we consistently are growing. And we feel that it's a business, and a lot of people think putting on a pretty show, an amazing flashing lights, sharks or lasers, you've got an amazing show, but newsflash, if you don't understand the industry and you don't look at what's happening in the world and where it is in that specific time. So it's quite relevant right now. You are not going to meet any objectives for anybody trying to run a business, because ultimately a fashion week is a business-to-business platform. In Africa, it's a little bit different. I remember I once told the British Fashion Council, we sell tickets to shows in Africa, and they roared with laughter, like, how can people buy tickets to attend this event? And ironically enough, 6 years later, last September, you could buy tickets if you had £400 to attend a day of shows at London Fashion Week. And for designers, I think it's an interesting time. A lot of them have pivoted that business model. They're making masks, they're making protective gear. I saw one of the designers from the Durban Fashion Fair platform was calling out on social media saying, do you know anyone that can make shoe covers? It's like, have you ever thought about someone who makes evening dresses? They're talking shoe covers. So there's a bit of a survival mentality, but it's not going to go on forever. These designers are not going to be making masks forever. I think the market's actually pretty saturated right now, but it was a good way for them to put some income in a time when effectively government for 5 weeks said, no, you can't buy anything. And I also don't see one of the designers pick up right away for a lot of what those designers are selling. We'll be talking to them consistently because we're busy trying to work out. Some fashion weeks are being postponed, some are being cancelled, some are going virtual, and we're trying to see where it stands. Because again, if it's not a good business case at this time, it's not a good time to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. The creative space or the fashion industry is known to evolve and adapt and figure these things out. So I don't think it's going anywhere. You mentioned the digital or the virtual space, and many voices are saying that is where we are now. Let's quickly zoom in on digital and virtual fashion shows. How far into the future? I mean, we're seeing shows pop up here and there, on the net. But how far into the future are virtual or fully virtual or digital fashion shows?
It's very, very interesting. I had one of our partners in the UK send me a proposal that they'd received from a company that's doing full CGI, the models and everything. The designers even share the fabrics and the patterns with them, and they create a fully virtual show. No one else is doing that. But the cost of it, £40,000 before you've even started.
Wow.
So R1 million, not many brands are going to take it up. But when we actually polled the designers just to see where they are, they still want a show, because the cost of doing a virtual show is not much less than doing a proper show. So to reward the clients, to be able to do that little bit of ego boost, but also what comes with it, because nowadays, for example, Instagram is one of the biggest drivers in fashion. We can't ignore that. And if you chat to their head of fashion, Eva Chen, she tells you outright, she says, we drive our fashion feedback not necessarily from brands, but from the models and the people on the ground. They, the ability to tag in Instagram came from models asking to be able to tag the brands that they worked with. Yeah. When you see that, it's random, but again, it comes back to that business thing. When we work in some markets, we can only book models with XYZ number of followers. And part of the contract of that booking that we write into it is they have to do a backstage post, or they have to share a ramp image afterwards. And brands have cottoned onto that. But in terms of virtual, live streaming is not new. We live streamed the first African fashion show as a group of creatives in 2010. We've streamed from a number of countries. It's been fantastic with Mustafa, Swahili Fashion Week, I think in 2013. Someone literally stood next to the streaming computer holding a phone in the air to keep that 4G or 3G signal going.
Yes.
So the technology is not new. The augmented reality, this has all been done. Fashion, by its very nature, is about jumping onto trends before other people and adopting them. There have been some spectacular flops over the time, but again, you don't know unless you try. But now, if you look at what's happening, Shanghai Fashion Week has just gone fully digital. Earlier last month, British Fashion Council announced that London Fashion Week Men in June would be going fully virtual.
Wow, already.
Helsinki has what they call Virtual Fashion Week. It's not new, but this particular season, even Camera Moda announced that Milan Fashion Week in June is being moved out to July, and same as London. They are bringing women's wear on board, which would traditionally be a menswear platform. And the purists are shouting out, like, how are you doing this? But in reality, COVID hit Italy. It hit it hard. A lot of those fabrics are made in Italy. One of the big Euro brands purchased a textile mill in southern France. The average workforce age was 62 or 63. Half of them have died from COVID. There's a real knock-on effect. They cannot make the manufacturer because they can't manufacture the collection because the fabric isn't being made and they don't have a supplier currently, and they can't travel to get that supplier and samples to start even developing the samples of the collection. So it's really an interesting time. But the designers that can put together collections, they would love to do virtual shows, but sadly, until about August, I don't think it's going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
So what's happening is virtual. So we're looking heavily at virtual, where we do a show under very controlled circumstances. Unfortunately, there are no guests. Maybe one or two key media will invite during the time under strict conditions. But what we are doing essentially is using a very small model pool, a very small backstage pool. For example, Jen, our head producer, said just yesterday, she said, I wonder if we'll ever see the madness of a backstage again. And then we realized
the thrill of the backstage.
when we produced Lagos Fashion Week, there were more than 400 people backstage in very close quarters. And I think that may change. But also we've spent a lot of time in our business slimming down the teams, more people doing less people doing more. So I don't want to say more people doing less. That's terrible. We'd have to get into government. But ultimately, the virtual platform is going to be good, but we've got to leverage it. It's got to push to an online sales mechanism, because a big trend in fashion, like we were saying, London Fashion Week's now selling tickets, is the push direct to consumer. That the buyer culture is there, but it's waning. Social media, there was, I don't know, I think 5 years ago, there was a big push for see now, buy now. When the fashion show ended, you could buy the stuff right away. Bar one or two brands, the bulk of them just sat with warehouses of stock that eventually ended up just being pushed into like a TK Maxx or something globally. You could go and buy that normal high-end brand for like just nothing, because it didn't work. But again, if you don't try it, you don't know. But I think it's now more successful in the sense that we can do an online show in there. If you like it, you can hunt down the designer like you traditionally do if you'd seen it somewhere, or really to push it at that time while people are excited to an online channel that is able to create and fulfill that order
and sell. And I think it's whatever we're doing now, whatever decisions and transitions taking place now, it's still got to make business sense. And I think more than ever, we've got to ask how we can monetize all of these new endeavors. You spoke about, or you mentioned with the digital space, so the technology is not new, and this is something you mentioned earlier. It's just that now we are forced to figure out how to fully, get onto those platforms and leverage the technology. So even though we've been playing with the technology, I think the realization that suddenly we are at the mercy of this has become a reality. With digital, and apart from the costing which you mentioned earlier, because I personally didn't realize that digital would be would be equivalent in costing or expense. But what are some of the challenges with going digital?
I don't think necessarily when I say the cost is the same, the cost is similar. You still have models, you still have backstage, you still have a lighting cost. You now suddenly are not needing to film the shows. You always are filming them. It's how you're doing it afterwards. But fashion weeks are traditionally sponsorship or grant funded. Very, very little income comes from the likes of charging a designer or ticketing. So the problem with sponsors is that some will come on board, and there could be new ones, perhaps digital brands that love the idea of digital. But a lot of those traditional sponsors, there's no value for them if the actual event doesn't take place.
If it doesn't happen.
So we've seen this on one or two platforms, particularly one in the UK that we work with. It's not necessarily a fashion week. It's quite similar. It's a showroom concept. their sponsors completely pulled out. It was a refreshment. They pulled out. They said, if it's not physically taking place, people are not tasting the product, they will not be converted to buying it. So the other challenges, I think, are slowly falling down. Like, when say 10 years ago we streamed the first show, I got excited. We had 10 people watch that show. It felt like 1 million people tuning in today.
Of course. Yes.
But also in our business, we travel a lot for meetings, and suddenly we're not allowed to do that. And those clients, and I love you, all our clients, but who insisted I had to fly for hours to sit in a meeting, suddenly they are also now forced to do video conferencing. So all along what we've been saying is video conferencing can work. Suddenly they can see it can work. But the converse of that is really exciting. They now understand how to use a little bit more technology. It's not difficult to log on to a channel or YouTube or Netflix. You can do it. So as long as you have an address, you understand streaming now, and data has never been as prolific as it is now.
Absolutely,
but ultimately, the biggest problem, I think we've got over that, is that people are willing to consume something on a phone, on a laptop, on a TV, whereas before they may have been apprehensive. And the challenge for us, I think that was the biggest one. But now the next part is integrating that into having traditional shows. So, it's what one of the big brands, I think it was Balmain, they were saying, we only have 600 people watch a show, but we have 1 million people tune into a live stream.
Oh, wow.
That's absolutely incredible. Whether or not they live stream, I think their post video, which every fashion week has done anyway for years, it's still there. It's online. Some of those videos hit 1 million, 2 million views over the course of a few months afterwards. But I think that the biggest challenge we've got over, that fear of technology, and I think designers, as they realize that it's an addition, it's temporary now, but it's an addition later that we can use. And what we've proposed for one of the other big platforms we work on is, post-COVID, what we can do is you can only put so many designers into a fashion week schedule. So what we've proposed to the client, and they've really liked the idea, is that from the 300 or 400 applications, we can only put 36 designers on a schedule. So we grew that to 48, which became a bit unmanageable. You've only got so many time slots over so many days. But some of those upcoming emerging designers, what we can do is we can fake the show. So we will film it, we will photograph it, it'll be on the same catwalk, it'll just happen in the afternoon while the evening shows are in hair and makeup starting to get ready. It'll be a true show, there just won't be an audience for it. Or we'll do it at midnight afterwards, because we paid for that infrastructure. It doesn't cost us anything more to do an extra 5 designers a day for 4 days. But that's 20 extra designers whose images are sitting in an image library. Their videos are sitting online. They get streamed perhaps as the precursor to the live stream. So that's how we've seen that the technology perhaps can better what we're currently doing. As just one example. We've got quite a few more, but
absolutely. I think if anything, I mean, I've had a look at your reports. I've had a look at some of the work that you're doing, and if anything, if we get this right, we're going to be able to use technology to elevate the industry, because as you just explained, it opens up a whole lot more opportunities, and you're able to do more because we're not as restricted or limited within the digital domain. Now, Simon, none of us expected, or no one expected, this sudden change, and we know that it's an adapt or die situation we're currently facing. But how can, I know you work with designers, so you work with the local designers, but you've also worked with some of the biggest brands who've been sponsors of your fashion shows. What can they do to innovate at this point? Because we need to be able to think out of the box right now. What should they name in terms of innovating and finding or coming up with these fresh new ideas?
Well, I'm not a designer, but if we take what we're hearing from the designers, I think a lot of them have freaked out initially. Suddenly you had no access to a channel to sell your product. You didn't have access to a supplier or a store to get fabric or trim. your CMT was closed down. It really, you went from being able to create something, manufacture it and sell it, to you could sketch out a few cool ideas. Maybe, I know one of our designers said they literally just made their collection ready to go into store, and all their money was tied up in this and they couldn't get it out. And then sort of the masks was an interesting one, because I love when businesses pivot and they do something else. They take their skills and they're able to find more money. It's very temporary. As I said earlier, I think the mask market is well covered. Maybe we'll all change out our masks once a month for the next while. But in all honesty, between the cheap imports, I see every cycle manufacturing clothing people. They're also now making masks. It's well covered. I think that one's gone. But to future-proof themselves, I think designers really need to step back and look at how they reach the market. And online, I think, is a big part of this. It's retail. It's in a really interesting space at the moment. And I've got to choose my words so carefully, but there's one 4-letter word I could use with an ED attached to the end. But it's for the foreseeable future. I really think they also need to factor in that the economy is at the worst it's been in years. And the problem with that is that when disposable income drops, those nice extra clothes, those nice extra outfits become not necessary. It's not a need, it's a want. And Absolutely, if you also have to choose your last money to buy a jacket and you've only got so much, you probably are going to go for that really crappy fast fashion. So I think designers, and this is my opinion, maybe need to look at where they are pricing themselves. And it's not easy. They need to eat. They need to cover the costs of production. And none of that is cheap or easy in South Africa. But I think the ones that balance a broader, more wearable collection and then really leverage that social media, the online sales, networking and chatting to people who are able to put it online in a place where there's sufficient traffic and growth to buy it, I think is crucial. And then on top of that, they also have their social media. So again, network like never before. Become friends again with your customers. I think when times are good, sometimes people forget that the customer is the only reason you're actually in business. And no matter how good you are, with no customers, you'll just have a showroom or a storeroom or maybe even just a rail in your house of the most amazing clothes. But if you're not hitting that, it's dire. You're just not going to sell them.
Absolutely.
And from our side, where we're trying to go is gearing the platforms to raise, because a fashion week or a fashion show is really just a marketing channel. And there's some fashion weeks that they say if you come and show with us, you're going to be famous, you're going to be a billionaire, you're going to sell all your clothes. It never works like that. The only designers who really do well out of a fashion week are the ones who realize it's just another marketing channel. It's like a billboard or a magazine advert or throwing $1,000 at Instagram ad spend. It's just another channel. Absolutely. But if you combine it with the other ones and you play a good PR game and you put that effort in, you do so much better than those that just sit back and expect it to come. So it's that lesson. And what we're trying to do is now take the platforms and get even broader coverage. If you're making, like you wearing a great suit and tie there, Colin, if one of our designers are doing that, we're pushing that angle, like to the business magazines. Why are you not featuring it? Why are people wearing imported suits?
Absolutely,
because, I'll reference a menswear week. Our thing on Menswear Week has always been educating the African consumer that the quality, the price points, the sheer availability, and everything is there. It's just people default to the big known ones. I don't want to look like a million people. I'm wearing an old T-shirt. I'm mourning the death of SAA and not flying. So,
of course.
But it's proudly made in South Africa. We all have to support that. But ultimately, it's about getting the designers to market. And I think every channel that they can use to hit more and more people, law of large numbers, the more people you hit, the better it is. So do what the scammers do when you get all those scam emails. They're just hitting 10 million people. They just need 3 to fall for it. Do the same selling your garments.
This is as uncensored as we can get.
No scamming, please.
Absolutely not.
Deliver the garments.
Not in South Africa. I want to talk about the platforms. You're no doubt at the forefront of restructuring the platform and what we're doing with it, Simon. But let's quickly zoom in on current innovations. I know you touched on this briefly, augmented reality, purely virtual, and also the role of the media. So you mentioned bloggers earlier. Let's quickly touch on current innovations and how this is going to boost the economy, and then quickly the role of the media today with this transition.
Okay, sure. That's a lot. Let's maybe just start with media. The shift, when I started back on Fashion Weeks, there was a whole front row, and I'll first talk locally, and then I'll talk what we do globally. Yeah. There's this huge front row of magazine editors, and you saw the fashion images and everything as a consumer. 3 months later in print, or 2 months later came out a trend report and an editorial with the images. Sure, the TV shows were showing them right away, but I remember when we started, we were delivering images right away online. No websites were running up to us. I think there was one back then called iFashion. They were doing it, but everyone else, it didn't exist. There was not Facebook. There was not Instagram. A blogger, what is that? Someone's writing about what they like? That's insane. And then slowly things started changing, and then quite rapidly things changed, and then everything just changed completely. In South Africa, let's talk magazine editors in a front row. I hope this doesn't sound insensitive, but I think we've just got Glamour and GQ left. Back in the day, we had a lot. But the rise of the website, and I'm very cautious to say not blogging. I'll get to the bloggers. You know, I love you guys. We have an interesting relationship.
Play nicely. But digital magazines or digital sites.
But the digital magazines have been incredible, and the quality is amazing. If you look what Mondi does with Renaissance Man, or Krishna does with Africa is Now, Uno does with 10 and 5. It's really, they've got captive, great, amazing audiences. We've always, locally in our projects, we've gone broader. Look at Hypebeast. Hypebeast has more people in one day than Vogue sells magazines globally around the world. Wow. And also, that's also a new consumer. I remember in one of the Menswear Week, we put a T-shirt brand in, and one of the people turned their nose up and said, but they just make T-shirts. That T-shirt brand was exporting to Hong Kong. That T-shirt brand was exporting to Japan. They were to Spain, to Germany. And I'm sorry, but that designer that was looking down on them was just making dresses for the local audience. This stupid T-shirt brand was exporting probably more in dollar terms than they were doing in rands.
Wow.
And those hype beasts are the biggest spenders in fashion. Like unless you're buying absolute couture, they are spending 5,000 Rand on a pair of shoes regularly. Unfortunately, that's not going to our designers, but the clothes are that they are wearing with these outfits. They cycle outfits faster. But the transition of media has been really, really interesting. And the rise of the influencer, and now the micro-influencer, and the wannabe influencer. But ultimately, that front row has changed. And social media has also changed the consumption of fashion, which means that the next phase of what a fashion week does is going to definitely be more consumer-based, purely because those brands now have a channel to reach directly. I don't want to discount the buyers, those small boutiques and dedicated retailers. They're doing amazing works, and they are the foundation of the fashion industry. But the ability to retail direct has also been very, very interesting, because not only are designers getting the full margin, so a lot of them are only doing that now, but also I think where they really have an advantage now that they didn't have 10 years ago is they can tell bigger and better brand stories. And I think there's a more educated consumer out there, but the face of who attends the shows has really, really changed. And it seems to be more focused, but we don't have more seats, so we can't invite hundreds and hundreds of different bloggers. You know, we have the fashion and beauty people sitting there. We've got the streetwear guys sitting there, but they're still attending all the other shows. And the designers are now, if we leave Continental and we work on some of the shows, let's reference what we're doing, for example, London Fashion Week. We work closely with the PRs, and we don't select that list, but each show is very, very specifically curated in terms of which media provide the most coverage and the best value for that designer. So it's very, very different here in Africa, where one pass gets you into all the shows, London, New York, Milan, Paris. That doesn't work like that. Each show is very, very specific, and PR chooses the media that goes there. But it has migrated from print. At least there's still a great print culture overseas, but slowly those titles are changing. They are also changing. Look at Vogue. They tried a strategy of holding back to keep the juicy stuff for the magazine, but everyone else was already putting it online before them, so they had no choice but to join that.
They had to,
And there've been some experiments. They failed. D&G put all the bloggers in the front row in, I think, around 2009, and that flopped. There just was no coverage, and a lot of people at the time, when everyone looked at it later, said, oh, but the media then snubbed the brand because why should they be in the second row? But it turns out all the media gave the same coverage. They all want to brag that they're at a D&G show. They want to say what it's there. You can't do coverage of Milan Fashion Week and not cover their show, for example. But it showed the return on investment is crucial. So I think we're still figuring that out, this transitional phase of the virtual shows. We are losing that backstage Instagram moments. We are losing the front row feeding to their audiences, which combined are hundreds of thousands of people and millions in global sense. But we've got to find a way around that. And for us, we're looking at the put together of a virtual week, but somehow we need to still have people talking about it and sharing it. And that's going to be quite tough.
A quick question with just and as an overview of everything you've just said. Do we really need those backstage, Instagram live little moments? If we are, let's say, the future of fashion shows are where you've produced this really good show so that you can purely leverage virtual and obviously digital, and you've carefully selected your front two rows of digital magazine editors. And that's really all you need let's say, in the fashion show venue, because strategically you know that the reach is going to be so much more. Do you really need those backstage moments?
Combined, and I think it's Burberry, combined backstage from Instagram stories on the models was something like 150 million views.
Oh, that's incredible. Okay.
So there I would say yes. And if you go to any global fashion week, the backstage photography culture is insane. And for many years, I wondered where the value in that is. But storytelling has also evolved.
And now we're seeing it, yes.
And it's about people now. And the fashion show, you may say, but what value is that to the designer for the clothes? Shooting the models backstage in beautiful black and white arty pictures. What the hell does that do to selling clothes?
Absolutely.
It's bringing awareness. Again, it's that big picture. People are talking about it. The models are backstage in those garments. It may not, for example, let's say they have an average price point of €1,000. The audience that buys the €1,000 may not necessarily be flicking through, one of the edgier street magazines that are out there, like Hunger or something. But ultimately, it is positioning it quite nicely, and that additional content goes out, and people then look back, and you can never have enough eyes on what you do.
Absolutely.
Because the more people looking, we go back to our scammer theory. at some point somebody's going to pull out a credit card and buy something.
And that's essentially
and you don't know who that is. And it's always the thing. I once heard this thing saying fashion can learn from car salesmen, because most people who buy supercars rock up in faded jeans, t-shirts, and the worst looking sneakers.
Absolutely.
And if those salesmen in those car dealerships are only expecting people to walk through in button-up shirts and everything. I have a friend, Gordon, who does property development. And sorry, Gordon, I'm telling a private story here. He bought a very, very expensive 7-figure, very fast car. And he walked into the dealership in shorts and a T-shirt because it was on the morning. He wanted that particular car. And they refused to serve him. They just looked him up and down.
Oh, wow.
And
wow, that's the problem,
he left, phoned, the car was available. He said, look here, I'll come in, we can do the EFT on the spot, and I'm going to buy this car. And finished up his coffee at the place across the road, walked back and said, now are you willing to serve me? Can we just do this deal?
Oh, wow.
And then it was a knock-on story, because a lot of people, I think, don't want to walk into those beautiful stores like Bond Street in London or Fifth Avenue in New York. They're there, and someone once said to me, I was always too shy, because I'm proudly the worst dressed person in fashion, and I always felt people would look down on me. And they said, but look here, you going in, you may end up buying something. Newsflash, I can't afford a $5,000 suit, but I wouldn't mind looking at it. It's connected to what we do.
Yeah.
They are there to serve you and potentially do it. And it was very interesting, because the higher the brand, the more they were willing to engage with you, no matter how badly dressed I was, or if I was just finishing, coming off a show or something. They were happy to talk to you. And I found that very, very interesting. And I think a lot of the younger brands can learn from that. You never know who's going to buy the clothes.
Absolutely. And I guess that's where we see, I wanted to just understand the value of those backstage moments, and I think the value dynamic has definitely changed, because 5 years ago we didn't think that those, doing little stories with your cell phone, in those spaces had much value. But today, those are the things brands are using as a measuring stick. So they're using that and they're placing value on that. So I want to talk about two things from findings in a recent report that you published. Your report says that 90% of designers that you've polled would rather do a real fashion show instead of a digital.
So we polled just over 250 designers on 5 platforms, and we said, this is where we're thinking of going. It's not a permanent situation. We're not going to just suddenly shut shop on fashion weeks. But what do you think of a virtual fashion week? And then post-COVID, what would you like to do out of either? And 100% said post-COVID, they want a show, because not only is it the first 2 rows of media we were talking about, but also it's their audience. It's seen as a reward. Yeah. If I buy enough Colin jackets, you're going to invite me to the show. And I'm not buying them because of Colin. It's just a nice thing to say, I'm in that market in terms of region, and you are looking after me and you're thinking of me. But also secretly, you're hoping I'm going to see that amazing one with bananas on it or something, and I'm going to part with money. I love my banana jackets. But yeah, it's. I'm trying to think in terms of.
Is it not concerning? So I read your report and I read a lot of the findings. The fact that 90% of your people that you polled are saying we're not ready for digital, we'd much rather prefer in-person fashion shows. Is that not a concern?
It's why I paused earlier is I was trying not to name the designer that.
I was wondering what that was about.
Saying XYZ said, so I'm going to just say XYZ.
Okay.
Was a consistent feedback, but I think they said it better than anyone else. They said, they realize they have no choice right now.
And that's what I was
do it
to.
digitally, or they don't show. And the danger of not showing is, and I'm not saying showing in a fashion week is the make or break of a brand, but a consistent public push on a correct platform with the correct PR. We've discussed all of this. You have an exponential advantage on anyone else. The doing of a fashion week, leveraged correctly, is exponentially more effective in terms of cost and reach than anything else. You can go and shoot an amazing lookbook out on location. A few publications will pick it up, but it's not part of that general grouped focus on a specific segment, women's wear, menswear, resort wear. But the designers say the same thing that our head of production, Jen, keeps pointing out. You can't replicate the atmosphere of a show. And we realize it's only 500 people are watching the show, and a million people are looking at it online or the photographs of stuff. But ultimately, the 500 people, in theory, now we get back to the creating of the lists, are the correct 500 people who somehow passionately can tell that story to the next 1 million people, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, the correct space, the correct production, and a tight, amazing show, it can't be beaten. It's the same reason that if I said to you, Colin, right now, who's your favorite music artist? Okay, you said Taylor Swift, so we're going to just run with that. If I say, Colin, here's a Taylor Swift hour of music on Spotify, or here's a plane ticket to go see her
in concert. I'm with you.
You're gonna, you're definitely going to choose Spotify. No, I'm kidding. You're going to take that plane ticket and go and see Taylor Swift in concert.
Of course.
And that's the bit of a magic of Fashion Week. And I think the brands, there was a great talk recently by Condé Nast where the creative director of Chloe and Balenciaga, they said they're doing digital. They're embracing it. They're jumping wholeheartedly in. They're throwing millions of euros across the brands combined, but they can never replace the show. So for me, I think that some of the designers don't understand that it can be effective yet, and I think that may have skewed the 90%. But the large part just say there's something about the live show that they want because it's their audience, their customers, the media, and also that grouping. But we can get the grouping digitally. We can create an even more amazing show. For example, our principal idea for live virtual shows is that they're not actually live. We pre-produce them a day or two earlier because it allows us to get that stream perfect. We even do the backstage. We do everything. If I didn't admit to this right now, anyone watching it would think it's live. But we can up the quality. And the live streaming, it's been around forever.
Yeah, because the end goal or the objective really is that you package what is current to what the designers are producing and presenting. You package it in a way that it's tasteful enough to entice your audience to buy, which is a global and a local audience. I'm going to head on over to our live stream, Simon, or our live chat on YouTube. I've got two questions. One from Derek. He says, we need to move away from fashion as entertainment and eventing. Designers need to critically look at the modes in which they promote their product, to whom, how, why, and at what cost. And then this is directly to you, Simon. In the current print media climate in SA, how should designers be thinking in regards to promotion going forward? That's just a question on YouTube Live.
Okay, so for Fashion Week, it's for Derek's question on Fashion Week's entertainment and the like. I'm 100%, and it's been consistent even in this chat we've been doing. It's a business. It's a business like investing. It's a business like selling cars. It's a business like Taylor Swift. But there is an element that you need to put out there and dangle it to entice the broader audience.
Absolutely.
The B2B model of a fashion week globally has rapidly changed, and we can thank Instagram for about 50% of that change.
Wow.
And what they're doing, because they can make money off it, is they're incentivizing the ability to see it, buy it, drive it, and affiliate marketing. There's just so much out there at the moment. And there needs to be a bit of an entertainment element while keeping the business side where it is. And I think the most important thing or example we can use of that is really, I think, British Fashion Council, out of all the global fashion weeks, they're getting it done better than anybody else.
Wow.
They're not losing the business side. They are the buyers, they are the media. And the bloggers and the influencers and the PRs are managing it. But what they're doing is they're realizing that the consumer is increasingly important. If you go to New York Fashion Week, or you go to Pitti Umo, or you go to London Fashion Week, outside at any point are 1,000 people just dressed up to be there. Those are the followers of fashion. That's what we've called now. And these are the people we need to speak to, because they help shape what their friends buy. They help shape what others think. So, they're an influencer, but they're actually more effective because they are driving the interest in what is happening. And the entertainment side, if you're going to have a fashion show that people are going to just come and speak, by all means, have it as that. There's lots of little tour evenings and shows. They exist. There's awards and music and fashion all together. That's quite a big growing segment throughout Africa. But it is what it is. And the designers, people look at it and they say, oh, but that's entertainment. It's not. You are on a platform reaching 2.5 million broadcast people on a particular channel. Spice. One of the designers said, what am I getting out of this? They sold out of everything they after they left.
Wow.
400,000 rands worth of clothes sold in 24 hours.
Wow.
That is entertainment.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we are in the era of the celebrity and everything. And the other problem is that in South Africa, we don't have buyer culture. It doesn't exist. So what we need to do is, we can't sell to buyers that are not there. We can't cry that the buyers are not there. I'm listed as a buyer in another fashion week because I once go and shake Paledi's hand and say, cool, I see you, I'm going to the airport. And I still get the buyer emails. So we don't have a picture of who actually are the buyers. And we've tried really hard on menswear, for example. I can speak for this because not even to be produced, but we own it. But instead we took a very, very different approach there. We really looked at how do we get the consumers connected to the designers and put it together that consumer number is growing exponentially over time, that they're not going to walk into a chain store that's just importing stuff. They're rather going to source. To be honest, there's something every price point at every quality. There's good, there's bad, but there's enough good that if it's available and you get it without a fuss and you like it, you're going to buy again. That's proven. That's the research has been done. And then the next question, I can't remember, Colin.
Sorry, Derek was asking about, we'll expound that quickly. Derek was asking about, in the current media climate in South Africa, how should designers be thinking in regards to promotion going forward? I think that's many of the points you touched on earlier.
Well, to be honest, there's not many media left. I know this. I look at the ever-thinning true media, and I want to discount what a blogger does as much as I focus on to time.
Always.
There are always, it's me, but the print industry, the most reach you will get at the moment is to go into a daily newspaper.
Wow.
It blows people's minds. You will get more reach than going into a glossy magazine at this point. And I don't want to discount the very few that are left. But all the designers have reported it's great getting an editorial. It's great getting the cover in magazines. We appreciate it. But from a business sense, in an honest answer, people report that life section in the daily newspaper gets more traction to more people than a glossy magazine. I mentioned something earlier. They are great drivers of very focused fashion follower, we'll use that term again, to the designers. So people are seeing it and they're inquiring, and the rate is still horrific. The conversion rate, which is people see something they like to buying it, is still horrific. It's like 1 in 70 or 1 in 80. But you need 80 times 10. You need 800 people to sell 10 things. But the difference is that next time you're 80, drops to 70. And that one person wearing something else can get to a party. And unfortunately, it's the way it works out.
Absolutely.
And through social media and sort of backing people who have the ability, and I'm going to be forced to use the word influencer here, so just slash my wrists now. But it is a way in which designers are able to reach more consumers, holds any value. And it's the same, many of the big brands, they've got a brand ambassador. So an influencer could just be a brand ambassador for a designer under a different name, and a brand collaboration. So, for example, like an interesting one that just happened, and always their collaborations are really, really crazy. But Supreme has just gone with someone that makes boring jackets. Like, what's happening? All going to be sold out. And designing the first retail price. It's an interesting thing in showing how social media also works. Is at the retail price of that jacket, it's completely in line with an average purchase, an RRP. But the resale value for the people who can't get it, and they do use a scarcity model, but because of that hype and that connection, it sells for multiples of the original. So I'm not going to say every designer is our next Supreme, but ultimately what they are able to do is acknowledge what works. And for example, there was one very, very interesting designer from Durban, and that's where he sold. And if I tell you, he's driving a Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon now, so there's clearly a good business model there. And the way he promotes it is he does one show a year in Durban on the DFF platform, and then he takes all those pictures and he floods everyone's social media. And then next to it, he gets all the local cool kids and he puts a picture of them in the outfit next to the catwalk one. Basically, you can buy this cool person, the catwalk is wearing it, come and buy it. And he sells out.
And that's the power of digital. That's
basic. I think he's paying 50 Rand a weekend for the table that he's busy putting it on. And again, that it's not everyone's a Supreme, not everyone is this particular designer.
Absolutely.
So it's finding what works for you.
Yeah.
And that's, again, right where we started. It's that big data. You don't have to have a server farm in your garage outside, but you've got the internet. And trial and error will help a designer focus. But again, that's only if they're making something somebody wants to sell. It's all very nice making metallic, crazy space jackets, but to be honest, very small. It may be your market segment as a designer, but you've only got about 5 customers in South Africa. But if you own those 5 customers, you can keep on making metallic space jackets or spiky jackets or whatever, and they're going to buy it. But for the large part, you've got to make something more mainstream and something that people can buy at a price point to make it justified. Because at the end of the day, no matter how amazing you are, if I've got to spend crazy top money, let's say you're making beautiful women's wear, and I look at it and it's the same price as Chanel, the purchase decision is going to be very, very tough for 99% of the people. Unless they really want to support local, 99% of the people are going to buy Chanel, because when they're sitting around with their friends and they say, I'm wearing Chanel, it has more gravitas than someone who is saying, I'm wearing Colin. Then it's kind of like, okay, who's Colin? But over time, the right audience, Colin, you're going to grow, and it's cooler to wear Colin than Chanel's. You're supporting local, and it's even cooler when I look at it.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't happen overnight.
Absolutely. And the process, I think, what we're trying to do with this series is to understand the process of getting into where we're predicting, or many predictions are being made that wedding. So, Derek, thank you for that question, and then thank you for addressing that. That brings me to the next point. You recently hosted, or you had a guinea pig virtual fashion show. I'm going to call it a pilot, but you recently hosted one right here in South Africa. What was the findings?
Yeah, that was actually some time ago when I shared that with you. So we put a call out at the end of 2016. I remember putting that out actually on Twitter. People who like to scroll back through timelines, it's on there and you can get the exact date. But I remember I just got back from Swahili Fashion Week, and I was looking at something that we were trying to do in the UK. So at that time, we were producing a number of shows, but to really leverage a weak currency, like a lot of people do, you always look at how to maximize profitability in a business. I was still shooting a lot of shows, and we had a designer that had shown the previous year, and she contacted us and she said, Simon and Chris, how are we going to do something, but I'm not showing? And I said, look, we could do a small show for you off schedule, but it would work. Yeah. The costing, unfortunately, just was prohibitive. So instead, what we did is we faked it in a studio. We got 6 models. We set up some very basic studio lighting. So this was only for stills. It wasn't for video. And we photographed all the looks on 4 models, and we just slightly tweaked everything. But when you looked at the series of photographs, it looked like a real show. So when we were rushing around shooting shows and uploading Vogue, we slipped the show in, and it went live on Vogue. There's a lot of off-site shows that load, so as long as it's going and you go online. But the thing that was interesting is that the woman from the PR that we do a lot of work with, she phoned us and she said, have you seen Vogue's review of this show? And we said, no. Wow. We just took pictures of that. She said, exactly. So she sent us a link, opened it up, and it was electric and dazzling atmosphere and young cutting edge, and the audience cheered afterwards, and Vogue Starfighter, and we were like, wow, okay, well, this is crazy.
let's talk about that, Simon. And I want to be honest, I think that's the objective of the series. My next question was your predictions. Give us your predictions. What is the next step? What is the near future? And then what does the future of fashion shows look like based on your predictions? And I know your predictions or your input or your advice is or your opinion because of, you've done research, you are at the forefront of what is happening. Is that what the future of fashion shows look like?
So from our side, we've really, it's our business. And I'll be upfront when everyone says, you're pushing shows because that's your business. We would make more money on virtual shows.
It's incredible.
We've looked at it. We would make more money. So, but we lose what we love doing. And if you're not loving what you're doing, I don't know why you're doing it. Colin, you love broadcasting. That's why you're talking to me. We love
absolutely
doing fashion weeks. I don't always say we're the most creative.
Yeah.
But when we do sit down and we put it together, it is unrivaled. I'll toot a horn for my team on this one, purely because the ability to bring so many parts together unrivaled is really next level. And that's led to us having some amazing partnerships globally. So I've spent so much time on